Folks, welcome back to Fluid Backstage 2016. It's Josh Hageman with you. I'm your host for this segment. Today we have with us Erwin McManus. Erwin, welcome to Fluid. Thanks so much for being with us.
It's so good to be here with you guys.
Excellent. A few questions just to kind of get the ball rolling.
I thought I was here to interview you.
Well, you know what? Absolutely. We can switch it around. I got no problems with that.
No, sure, go ahead.
One of the things that is amazing about your tenure, even in pastoring, is that, as I understand it, you kind of, in your early years, you looked at the church and said, there's something different has to change here, because if we keep going the same direction, we're not going to catch, as many people as we can, or we're not going to hit the heart of God. What did that look like, in the early years of your ministry when you started looking at the church?
Well, I didn't grow up in the church, so I didn't have a preconceived idea of the church. I came to faith when I was around 20 years old. And when I became a follower of Jesus, I didn't really know that there was like this huge thing called Christianity, and I didn't know about denominations or anything like that, And it was probably at least another 10 years before I even knew about the suburbs and mega churches and things, and those things that are real common to us. So it wasn't that I was rethinking the church. I didn't understand the church, and I didn't understand why we did things the way we did. And then when people would explain them to me and try to give me a biblical context for it, I realized, all these convictions are not biblical, they're cultural. Yeah. And that was, for me, I think the beginning point was that I was just determined to remove all the non-essential barriers between my friends and God. And it seemed like the church was more committed to its traditions than to its children.
It's interesting, the idea of tradition over truth is such an incredible challenge that many churches face this day. And when I was a young adult, going through Bible college, your name came up a lot. And the terminology this is around the early 2000s, sure. and these terms kept floating out, like emergent church, postmodern church, and this whole idea of rethinking the way things were done. I know for me, coming out of Bible college, what I learned then, I feel like I'm still learning today and still learning and growing. What has it been like for you with your theology? Because you mentioned that you never came out of the church. You kind of found yourself into it, found Christ. From that point forward, what changes happened and took place in your theology? And where are you at today?
I'm not sure what you mean by what changes took place in my theology. I think that would be...
Like, how has your theology grown from where you were to where you are today?
Well, I didn't have any theology. I had never seen a Bible in my whole life, so in that sense, I was a blank slate. I was learning everything from scratch. When I was reading about Nebuchadnezzar, it was the first time. When I was reading about Moses, it was my first introduction to the guy. So I was, other than Cecil B. DeMille with the movies from the Ten Commandments to Ben-Hur, I was really new at all this. What I think is interesting to me is like things like emergent and like we never saw ourselves as a part of those movements.
That's interesting.
And people would superimpose that on us.
Right.
And I would say from the very beginning, we're not a part of that.
Yeah.
And they go, well, we don't know where to put you guys. And they go, yeah, but you don't have to put us anywhere. I think one of the difficulties was that emergent knew what it was against, but it didn't know what it was for.
That's good.
Postmodernism knows what it's against, but it doesn't know what it's for.
That's interesting.
And for myself, Mosaic was never about what we were against. We were always for the church. We were for the traditional church. We were for every church that loves people. And so we never did anything to violate what the church was doing. We never did anything because we were against what the church was doing. We were just for humanity. We were for the people we loved. We were for our friends. We were for Los Angeles. We were for the future. And I think that's probably a difference for us. And I think that's why movements come and go. But if you're committed to what you're for rather than what you're against. And early on I told so many of the leaders of Emergent, I said, you guys are destined to extinction. And they said, why? I said, well, if you lose, you'll become extinct. And if you win, you'll become extinct. Because you're only against things. So once you've destroyed them, what will you have? And I think that that's a part of the problem, is that a lot of times our positions are almost apocalyptic. We want to end the world but not begin a new one.
That's cool.
But,
With the start of Mosaic, you mentioned that you didn't want to be known for the things you were against, but the things that you were for. What are some of the things that you're for and you really love about your church?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love LA, and so few people love Los Angeles. But
during the march in Canada, we all love Los Angeles.
But I love LA. I love Mosaic. I went to Los Angeles because I did an assessment of global history, and I wanted to be wherever the future emerged. And 25, 30 years ago, I kind of concluded that Los Angeles is the capital of the future. You have like New York as the capital of finance, Washington is the capital of power. You have different places. Paris is like the capital of artistry. And you have so many places like that in the world, but Los Angeles is the capital of the future. It disproportionately affects the emerging generations more than any other city in the world. And I thought, what in the world is the church doing when we can actually see where the future is emerging, but the church isn't there? But I think one of the values that we held early on that is more readily accepted now, but it put me in the category of heresy back then. We had 5 core values, and our 5th core value is creativity is the natural result of spirituality. And frankly, the church saw creativity as the enemy of spirituality. And I didn't know how a person could even experience true spirituality without becoming creative, or experience true creativity without becoming spiritual. And so we wanted to integrate that intersection between creativity and spirituality, and this belief that every human being is an artist, that every human being is a creative, that we were imagined to imagine and created to create, that the church had a limited, if not an anemic, anthropology. And that in the same way that bees create hives and ants create colonies, humans create futures. That we're literally designed by God to materialize the invisible, to have a dream, a vision, an idea, and then to materialize that into reality. Civilization is simply the materialization of human imagination. To me, that's extraordinary. I mean, as naturally as silkworms create silk, humans create futures.
That's a deep thought. That's a deep thought. Powerful.
And I think that is one of the differences about Mosaic, is that we've never been about being trendy. We've been about being timeless.
That's good.
And that our focus hasn't been what's the coolest, hippest, edgiest thing to do. For us, it's been what makes us most uniquely and intrinsically human. And that's where we really focus our attention.
Being in LA, you probably see a whole slew of the Hollywood scene, all that kind of stuff, and you probably are privy more than any of one of us would be to the Christianity and what it looks like in that kind of a Hollywood sector. What's your take on Christianity in Hollywood, for example, compared to Christianity in the rest of North America? Is it different? Is it same? Do they have the same challenges, same things that we go through? Do they look at it through a different lens?
There are definitely different lenses. You just can't say that the human lens in New York is the same as it is in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
They're just different lenses.
I feel you, man. I feel you.
The lens in Montreal is different than the lens in Vancouver.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not just the church's lens or faith lens, it's the cultural lens. When I talk to pastors who say, well, I can't get my church to move faster, I can't get my church to become more innovative, and I go, where are you? And they go, well, I'm in Wyoming. And I go, well, why would you move to Wyoming and try to get people to act as if they chose to live in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
People choose even their pace of life. People choose where they live, oftentimes by the rate of change. It's not accidental that people move slower in Edmonton than they would in Vancouver, but they move faster in Edmonton than they would in Winnipeg, that they'll move slower and faster in Toronto than they would in Hamilton. And just in the same way in the United States. People move faster in New York, they move faster in LA. So people who like to move fast move to those urban centers. People who like to move slower move to Michigan, or they move to Ohio, or they move to Nebraska. If you want to move really, really slow, then you move to other places in the country where there's 3,000 people in the city. And I think it's a great danger when pastors read books about innovation and transformation and being on the cutting edge, and then they move to a town of 10,000 people. You need to respect that you're stepping into a particular culture, and you need to understand that culture and be able to speak into it.
So when you planted Mosaic, you knew what you were getting yourself into. You knew the culture that you were getting yourself into. Did you pull yourself out of another culture to get into that culture, or was that part of who you were and that really resonate with you?
I've had to really slow down to be in LA.
Okay. Oh, really? You slowed down to go to LA?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a type A with a type B softness around me.
Wow, interesting.
You know? And so it's like,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's just who I am. I like moving fast. I love living on the edge of risk. In fact, years and years ago, my wife and I have been married 32 years, and I would actually describe my wife as being a low risk taker. And then we took this assessment, and she came out the highest risk taker on the chart. But I came out something called brinksmanship, which meant that I would risk my life and everyone around me for the sheer attractiveness of the risk. Oh, wow. And so my wife, who's a super high risk taker, and now I look back and I go, my wife has been in the middle of Bangladesh and Indonesia. She's gone to Vietnam and Haiti. She's in the middle of every world crisis and sleeping on floors with rats everywhere. And I realized she's the greatest risk taker I've ever known.
Come on, man.
And, but perceptually, at that time when we were early in our marriage, I couldn't even perceive it yet. And what I've had to really recognize is that God did not create me to live in Atlanta. He did not design me to live in Cleveland. Great cities, and God designs people to be in those cities. And I think one of the greatest fits for like life is when you realize how God has crafted you and where you are best postured to reach a particular culture.
So
I'm designed to reach LA.
So good,
I'm designed for Paris and Tokyo and New York. And so I focus my life on those places in the world. I've tried to be effective in other places, and I'm just not compelling. You know, and so I go, I'd rather be where the resonance of my voice and my life and my essence matches the people who are searching for God, and they're able to see God in me because of the way God's uniquely crafted me. Just like they can see God in you in the way you're uniquely crafted. I think that's why God makes us different.
So good. Erwin McManus, thank you. Thank you for your input. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much.
Fluid 2016. Folks, that's a wrap.